Across the UK and in Scotland, Glasgow has a growing reputation for social and affordable housing that has come to prominence in the first 2 decades of the 21st century. And now Glasgow has embarked on an ambitious programme of decarbonisation that puts people and place at the centre of the process to achieve net zero carbon by 2030. The modern history of Glasgow is characterised by 4 distinct eras. The first, from the middle of the 19th until the early 20th centuries, saw Glasgow grow from an agricultural and ecclesiastical centre to become an industrial giant. This growth gave the city status, prosperity, wealth and an international reputation as one of the biggest cities in the world. This growth, however, came at a price for Glasgow citizens who powered the city's development. By the early 20th century, living conditions had deteriorated badly. In the years following World War II, the city's industrial base, artificially supported by a wartime economy, suffered systemic failure, and Glasgow entered a second era of economic hardship and widespread poverty. A national policy to depopulate the city, together with experiments in modernist city planning, escalated deindustrialisation and decline, leading to displaced communities and impoverished people across the city. By the 1960s, the situation had become grave, and a major storm at the end of the decade caused citywide damage and destruction. From the efforts to create temporary repairs, a group of architecture students introduced a new paradigm of renewal that provided the impetus to establish citizen-led housing associations, creating a movement to repair and transform the tenements of the city, as it was realised that deindustrialisation and unemployment, not the city's stone buildings, were the determinants of poverty and ill health. This work led to a change in direction for national policy. Demolition and clearance of stone buildings was halted and replaced with a regeneration programme to improve existing housing and maintain communities within their neighbourhoods. As the 20th century closed, Glasgow embarked on a third era characterised by renewal, regeneration and cultural renaissance that rebuilt the city's reputation for life and place.
Placemaking means that I like walking down the street in this area. It's part of the DNA of community-based associations that tenants have influenced things over the years. And right back at the beginning, it was very much, it was purely from tenants that this kind of movement built up to make things better, make the housing better, make the housing management better.
Glasgow Development Agency thought it would be a good idea to try to build like they were doing in Berlin and sort of rebuild the city centre. Now Glasgow has already been doing that in terms of saving the tenements and the Victorian heritage around, and the two ideas came together. The physical environment was absolutely tragic. It reached a really bad point. But when I arrived here working, there was a huge number of people who were totally committed to the area. There was a lot of healthy political and community activism, and there was a real desire to change things in many respects back to the way things used to be with the tenements. The critical factors were control of the land and a project champion. I would say also the backing and support at senior political and official level throughout the city, and a master plan is essential. The key thing that's given it longevity is the involvement of the local community. There's a real synergy between a desire for the right thing to be done and for when authorities use the right people to lead things off from a design perspective. The Gorbals community owns all of our housing, and from ownership flows control. They are in charge, they own the housing, they own the process. We want something fantastic here. We want the best of the modern design, which we were promised and we never got in the 60s, and we want the best of tenement living, which we had before the 1960s.
In 2003, in an era-defining moment, Glasgow's tenants voted for the voluntary transfer of city-owned housing to a newly established citywide Glasgow Housing Association. Development funding was transferred to Glasgow City Council as the strategic housing authority to deliver affordable housing to meet the city's diverse and changing needs, and to enable Glasgow to move forward with a housing-led regeneration programme shaped by local communities.
GHA is extremely proud of creating better homes, better lives and a better Glasgow. Regenerating communities is a big part of that, handing power back to people to improve their lives in the longer term. We want to do so much more in terms of continuing to consider the people who then live in those homes and the lives that they lead in those homes. A big organisation like GHA, in partnership with others, can do so much that really will improve the lives of people. The partnership working that we've established has definitely been key in propelling the ambitions that we've had forward. We wouldn't have been able to achieve all that we have without the excellent partnership working that we've have in place now with Glasgow City Council, with Scottish Government and with other stakeholders too. And let's face it, working in partnership isn't always easy. It takes some effort and it takes some give and take, but my goodness, it's very much worth doing it. And I can't stress strongly enough the importance of the tenant voice. It is at the core of every decision that's made, and as a tenant myself, it gives me great comfort.
By the end of the first decade of this century, Glasgow had established 8 transformation regeneration areas with a 10 to 15 year programme to deal with areas of the city still scarred by mid-20th century deindustrialisation, by putting city living through affordable housing at the heart of city regeneration. This work is being delivered by Transforming Communities Glasgow, a partnership between the Scottish Government, Glasgow City Council and the Glasgow Housing Association.
I think the regeneration areas are very much about creating new communities where people are involved. I think local people have been involved very much from the outset. What Transforming Communities Glasgow is about building genuine mixed communities where it's tenure blind, you can't tell whether it's a bought house, it's a social house or it's a mid-market rent. Local people are involved. I mean, local people have been very much involved in kind of the designing of their communities and kind of forming the shape of their communities. Decent forms of housing, but they have all the facilities that go with that, the kind of local shop, leisure facilities, education, medical facilities, and that's what we're doing with many of the regeneration areas throughout the city.
Since the establishment of the Scottish Parliament, Glasgow has worked in partnership with the Scottish Government and with housing associations to retain and develop momentum in the provision of social and affordable housing across Glasgow and in the wider city region. Together, home to nearly 40% of Scotland's population.
The leadership shown by Transforming Communities Glasgow is really important, and the role of community-based housing associations has been absolutely critical. Partnership working is essential because we can't deliver housing to 2040 on our own. Sustainability and placemaking are very important. We need to make sure that we build sustainable homes that are affordable for people, but also it's not just about bricks and mortar, it is about the communities that those homes are located in. And we want to make sure that people have access to green space as well, and that's been so important during the pandemic. A good example of placemaking is Clyde Gateway, which is developing a large area of land, not just for homes, but for employment opportunities and leisure pursuits for local people, and it's a lasting legacy from the Commonwealth Games, which is also important. I think Scotland and Glasgow are leading the way in a just transition to net zero, and I think that's by putting people and communities at the heart of that transition.
Today, these programmes are continuing with increased attention on decarbonisation and the retrofitting needed to combat the climate emergency, through increased urgency to upscale programmes and working with residents and communities to better understand decisions around energy efficiency and heat decarbonisation. The work goes beyond the 70,000 historically and culturally important pre-1919 stone-built tenements that give Glasgow its characteristic look and feel, to embrace some 430,000 homes across the city region that will require adaptation to make them fit for the next 100 years, while dealing with fuel poverty and upskilling the construction sector in a partnership that is interconnected and place-based in this fourth era for modern Glasgow.
The Glasgow Standard is a set of principles for affordable housing in Glasgow, which raises the sustainability levels and the space standards of the housing that we provide. Introducing the Glasgow Standard has been a major success. It's been a change in the way that we think about how we build housing, but it has been embraced by the housing associations in the city. We were certainly one of the first local authorities in Scotland to provide passive house social housing. We have taken that a step further, and we have a trial project looking at a pre-1919 tenement property where we're retrofitting the full block to Passive House Enerfit standard. The housing strategy and the housing investment programme both place a lot of emphasis on the place principle and about improving neighbourhoods and about 20-minute neighbourhoods. We try to make sure as much as possible that each of the new developments takes these principles into account when they're being developed, and that includes things like distance to shops, amenity space, parking, and all the things that make a good community.
In international practice, Glasgow was quick to embrace the 2013 United Nations Geneva Charter on Sustainable Housing, seeing its core principles of environmental protection, economic effectiveness, social inclusion and cultural adequacy as a validation of the city's own approach. And Glasgow, following the leadership of Vienna, staged UN conferences sending messages of support to the UNECE in implementing the Geneva Charter. This collaboration, begun in 2015, led to the establishment of a UN Charter Centre for Excellence based at the Glasgow Urban Lab, itself a partnership between the internationally renowned Glasgow School of Art and Glasgow City Council. The Urban Lab supports the UNECE in building a network of charter centres in a growing number of member states, including the Norman Foster Foundation in Madrid, with whom the Urban Lab collaborated on the preparation of Place and Life in the UNECE, a regional action plan for 2030, intended to assist member states tackle challenges arising from the COVID pandemic, climate and housing emergencies across regions, cities and neighbourhoods. The action plan, endorsed at the UNECE ministerial meeting of October 2021, furthers the principles of the Geneva UN Charter, adopts the findings of the Housing 2030 research, and introduces 3 new principles born out of the Secretary-General's 2020 policy briefs. Firstly, that cities are central to building back better. Secondly, cities cannot flourish without well-functioning housing systems. And thirdly, that housing, mobility, environment and economy are interrelated and require integrated responses. This recognises not only the importance of individual sustainable development goals, notably 11 and 13, but also their interrelated and indivisible nature, together with their vertical integration in global, national, subnational and local policy, design and delivery. From early beginnings in the 1970s, perhaps because they had a hand in the genesis of the community-led housing associations, the architectural and design community of Glasgow has played an important part in the quality of housing that has been delivered in the city over the last 3 decades. Enlightened procurement continues today in the urban, architectural and landscape design of transformation regeneration areas. Glasgow's early growth resulted in a pattern of neighbourhoods that were adversely affected by deindustrialisation, but the pattern of place remains and will form the basis of a network of neighbourhoods that provide local goods and services for the people of Glasgow within a 20-minute walk, cycle or wheel from their home. Glasgow believes that access to sustainable, affordable housing is a right. It is important, therefore, that the delivery of such housing is a necessary component of modern city planning and design. Housing is a pre-eminent necessity, but is not by itself sufficient to effect the transition required. Only when supported by economic prosperity, environmental quality, sustainable movement systems and meaningful cultural life can we hope to have established the sufficient conditions for the integrated and indivisible delivery of the SDGs. All of those contributing here agree that a transition Glasgow will make needs to be clean, green and just, and it must be done in a way that provides hope to help Glasgow's people transform their lives and the places they inhabit.
Huge lessons to learn, I guess, is design's really important. You only get one hit at the design and building of something. Tenant
engagement, in my view, is vital for success.
All our members believe in that essence of what local service means. It's that word local. It's being close to your tenants, understanding the area, in a way that only a truly local organisation can properly serve its community.
I think we produce some of the best quality social rented housing anywhere in Scotland.
I think bin market rent's a really good idea because it's helped us save so much, and with it being such a difficult time just now to buy property.
I've got this house now, I love it.